You may have always believed that empaths were gentle souls, the kind-hearted ones who gave too much, forgave too easily, and often got hurt because they saw the best in people. And you might have thought narcissists were untouchable, the masters of manipulation, the ones who could charm anyone, gaslight everyone, and walk away from every relationship unscathed. But what if I told you that the real power didn't belong to the narcissist? What if the true strength, the one that can actually break a narcissist, comes not from aggression or cruelty, but from compassion, from silence, from detachment? Because here's the truth. Empaths hold a secret power that narcissists fear more than anything else, and it has nothing to do with revenge, it has everything to do with awareness. In this video, we'll reveal why empathetic people are the only ones capable of truly destroying a narcissist, not by harming them, but by simply walking away and refusing to play their game. We'll explore how empathy works on a psychological level, how it fuels narcissistic behavior, and how its withdrawal completely destabilizes them. We'll uncover why narcissists panic when an empath awakens, why they return begging, why they smear your name behind your back, and why they become obsessed with your life after you leave. If you've ever wondered why someone so loving, so kind, so giving could be the very person who dismantles a narcissist's world, keep watching, because knowledge is power. And once you understand the real battle between empaths and narcissists, you'll never underestimate your own strength again. Let's begin. If you're here, it means you've either lived through the pain of being manipulated by a narcissist, or you're trying to understand what happens when an empath walks away. Either way, you're not alone. Millions of people struggle with the emotional aftermath of narcissistic abuse, and many of them don't realize that healing doesn't come from retaliation, but from understanding. Before we dive into the heart of this topic, let's take a moment to connect. If you found this content helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with others who might benefit from it. Awareness is the first step toward healing, and by spreading the word, you're helping others break free from cycles of emotional manipulation and control. Now let's start with the most important truth. Empaths unknowingly give narcissists the energy they need to survive emotionally. And when that energy is taken away, the narcissist begins to collapse. Psychologists describe empaths as highly sensitive individuals, people who absorb emotions like sponges, who feel others' pain as if it were their own, and who often put others before themselves. These traits make empaths deeply compassionate and emotionally intelligent, but also incredibly attractive to narcissists. Narcissists are drawn to empaths, like moths to a flame. They recognize the depth of feeling, the need to help, and the willingness to forgive. And they exploit it relentlessly. They gaslight them. They guilt-trip them. They manipulate their kindness into weakness. They twist their love into control. And for a long time, the empath stays. Why? Because they believe in healing. They believe in redemption. They believe that if they love deeply enough, listen long enough, and try hard enough, they can change the narcissist. But eventually, the empath wakes up. He sees the lies. He recognizes the manipulation. He understands the cycle. And he makes a choice that changes everything. He stops giving his energy. He walks away. And suddenly, the narcissist is left in darkness. Second, the empath stops validating the narcissist reality, and that shatters their illusion. Narcissists thrive on reflection. They need someone to mirror back their image to reinforce their belief that they are superior, admired, and untouchable. And for years, the empath unknowingly played that role. He listened. He nodded. He tried to make things better. He absorbed the blame. He gave meaning to the narcissist's words, even when those words were meant to hurt. But when the empath awakens, when he realizes the narcissist was never broken, just manipulative, he no longer validates the false narrative. He stops agreeing. He stops flinching. He stops carrying their emotional burden. And that silence, that refusal to engage, that lack of reaction, that is the beginning of the narcissist's downfall. Third, the empath removes himself from the game entirely, and that terrifies the narcissist. Narcissists rely on emotional engagement. Even negative attention fuels them. But when the empath simply stops responding, stops answering calls, stops engaging in arguments or explanations, the narcissist is left staring into nothingness. No drama, no conflict, no admiration, no emotional reactions at all. To a narcissist, this is worse than hatred, worse than rejection, worse than abandonment. This is erasure. And for someone whose identity depends on being seen, heard, and obeyed, being ignored feels like death. Fourth, the empath begins to expose the truth, not with rage, but with clarity. Once the empath awakens, he no longer feels the need to protect the narcissist's image. He understands that by staying silent, by shielding him from consequences, he allowed the cycle to continue. So he speaks, not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with honesty. He tells his story, he warns others, he unmasks the charm, reveals the patterns, and explains the trauma in ways that others finally understand. Therapists note that this stage is crucial in the empath's healing journey. It's not about destroying the narcissist, it's about protecting future victims. It's about restoring truth where deception reigned. And that exposure is devastating for the narcissist, because now his carefully curated image starts to unravel. Now, people begin to question the stories he told. And now, he faces something he cannot control. The truth being spoken clearly and confidently by the one person he thought he had already destroyed. Fifth, the empath begins to set unbreakable boundaries, and that leaves the narcissist powerless. Boundaries are the ultimate threat to a narcissist. And when the empath finally learns how to build them and enforce them consistently, it completely disrupts the narcissist's ability to regain control. Suddenly, the empath doesn't answer late-night texts. He doesn't respond to guilt trips. He doesn't defend himself anymore. He doesn't try to fix things. From the outside, this might look harsh, cold, unfeeling, but in reality, it's the healthiest form of self-protection. It's the empath choosing peace over chaos, truth over illusion, and freedom over control. Sixth, the empath begins to thrive, and that becomes the final insult to the narcissist. Perhaps the cruelest punishment a narcissist can suffer is watching the empath move on and live well without them. Because for years they convinced themselves that the empath needed them, that he relied on their presence, that his strength came from their influence. But now the empath is thriving, smiling, building a life full of purpose, surrounding himself with healthy people. And worst of all, for the narcissist, he is happy. Not just surviving, not just recovering, but healing, growing, and living with a depth of peace the narcissist could never imagine. And that success, that independence, that joy, it confirms what the narcissist feared all along. He was never the center of her world. He was never the reason she existed. He was never truly loved. Seventh, the empath begins to share his story, and that exposes the narcissist to the world. For years, the empath kept the narcissist's secrets. He protected his image. He justified his behavior. He told himself that if he just loved him harder, supported him longer, understood him deeper, he would change. But when he awakens, he realizes the truth. The narcissist wasn't hiding. He was performing. And now, he shares what he saw, not to destroy, but to warn. He tells others what he really did. He explains the red flags. He shows the pattern. He reveals the damage. And while outsiders may mistake this as cruelty, therapists describe it as protection. The empath is not seeking revenge. She's preventing others from enduring what she did. Eighth, the empath begins to detach spiritually, and that cuts the narcissist off completely. Emotional detachment is powerful. Spiritual detachment is final. When the empath begins to release the narcissist from her mind, from her prayers, from her energy, she removes herself from the energetic bond that once tied them together. This is not about forgetting. This is about releasing. And for the narcissist, this spiritual withdrawal is unbearable. He can no longer feed off her energy. He can no longer pull her back in. He can no longer twist her words or haunt her thoughts, because now she lives beyond his reach. Ninth, the empath finds inner peace, and that becomes the final victory. Perhaps the most painful blow to the narcissist is realizing that the empath is not suffering, that despite everything he said, everything he did, she is not broken. She is not crying. She is not begging for closure. She is not looking back. Instead, she is smiling, laughing, healing, growing. And that peace, deep, unwavering, and unaffected by his attempts to disrupt it, is the final proof that she won. Because the narcissist spent years convincing himself that he was the stronger one, that he was the one in control, that he defined her worth. But now, she has proven otherwise. 10th, the empath teaches others what he learned, and that ends the cycle forever. One of the most powerful aspects of the empath's journey is that he does not keep his lessons to himself. Once healed, he speaks up, he writes, he records, he warns, and in doing so, he protects others. He gives survivors the language to describe what happened. He helps people recognize the signs early, and he ensures that the narcissist's influence ends with him. Psychologists emphasize that this phase is critical for recovery. Sharing the story isn't just about healing, it's about empowerment, about reclaiming agency, rebuilding confidence, and refusing to stay silent any longer. And for the narcissist, watching this unfold is like witnessing his own shadow fade. His influence diminishes, his reputation cracks, his ability to lure new victims shrinks, because now, people know. Because now, the truth is known, and because now, the empath is no longer afraid. 11th, the empath begins to reflect strength, rather than vulnerability, and that breaks the narcissist's spell. For years, the empath reflected the narcissist's world back to him. She showed concern. She responded with empathy. She tried to soothe his fears and validate his existence, even when he didn't deserve it. But once she shifts, once she no longer mirrors his weakness, the narcissist is forced to face his own reflection. And for someone who avoids self-awareness at all costs, that is a terrifying moment. Because now, there is no one left to carry his emotional burden. There is no one left to justify his behavior. There is no one left to make him feel powerful. And that leaves him exposed. 12th, the empath refuses to be rewritten as the villain, and that strips the narcissist of his last defense. Narcissists rewrite history constantly. They tell themselves that they were never wrong, that they were misunderstood, that they were justified. And in order to maintain that belief, they need someone to blame, someone to play the role of the betrayer, the abuser, the one who failed them. That's where the empath used to fit in their narrative. She was the one who abandoned them, the one who betrayed them, the one who took their power. But now she doesn't care about their story. She doesn't accept their version of events. She doesn't fight their battles anymore. And that takes away the narcissist's final excuse. 13th, the empath begins to speak with clarity, and that destroys the narcissist's illusions. Empaths often enter relationships believing they can heal the narcissist, that if they show enough love, offer enough support, and provide enough understanding, they can bring out the good inside them. But when the empath finally wakes up, she sees the truth. The narcissist was never broken. He was hiding, and the empath was the one who helped him hide best. Now, she speaks differently, with clarity, with conviction, with unshakable truth. She no longer dances around the issue. She no longer softens the message. She no longer makes excuses. And that kind of honesty threatens the narcissist more than anything else. 14th, the empath stops offering forgiveness freely, and that shakes the narcissist's sense of security. Narcissists count on one thing above all, that their victims will eventually return, that after months of silence, the empath will come back with an apology, a plea for reconciliation, a desire to fix things. But when the empath stops forgiving easily, when she sets boundaries that cannot be crossed, she takes away the narcissist's safety net. He can no longer hoover her back in. He can no longer pretend he was misunderstood. He can no longer expect her to return just because he says sorry. And that forces him to face something he rarely allows himself to acknowledge. He lost someone who truly mattered, and he has no one to blame but himself. 15th, the empath begins to shine brighter than ever, and that blinds the narcissist. Empaths do not shine for attention. They shine because they are connected to something greater: compassion, intuition, and inner strength. And when they awaken from a narcissistic relationship, they begin to glow in a way they never did before. More grounded, more confident, more aware, more free. And that light, pure, unshaken, and undiminished, becomes unbearable for the narcissist. Because he built his world on shadows, on control, on making others feel small. And now, he watches as the person he once broke down now rises higher than he ever could. 16th, the empath builds a life that no longer includes the narcissist and that erases his presence completely. Perhaps the most painful reality for a narcissist is that the empath doesn't just walk away. She rebuilds. She creates a life filled with meaningful connections, deep healing, and authentic relationships. A life where he no longer fits. A life where his name is no longer spoken. A life where his presence is irrelevant. And for a narcissist, being forgotten is worse than being hated. 17th, the empath begins to teach others what she learned, and that spreads awareness faster than the narcissist can recover. As the empath heals, she gains insight. She understands the tactics. She recognizes the patterns. And instead of keeping that wisdom to herself, she shares it. She writes. She speaks. She guides. She educates. And in doing so, she helps countless others avoid falling into the same trap. She empowers people to see the warning signs earlier. She gives voice to those who still feel trapped. And every time she speaks, every time she shares, every time she warns, she chips away at the narcissist's influence. She weakens his ability to manipulate, control, and destroy. 18th, the empath begins to find peace, and that becomes the final nail in the narcissist's coffin. Peace is the ultimate contradiction to narcissism. It represents freedom, clarity, detachment, and for the empath, peace is not just possible, it is inevitable. Because empaths were never meant to suffer. They were meant to heal, to grow, to rise. And now, as she finds that peace, without him, without his approval, without needing his validation, the narcissist realizes the truth. He never owned her. He never controlled her. He never truly had her. She was always hers. And now, she belongs to herself fully. 19th, the empath becomes a mirror the narcissist can no longer tolerate. For years, the empath unknowingly served as a mirror to the narcissist. He reflected his actions, his choices, his flaws, and though she tried to soften what she saw, she could not erase the truth. Now she reflects something even more dangerous to him: clarity, strength, freedom. And for a narcissist who thrives on distortion, that mirror is unbearable. Because the more the empath shines, the more he sees his own darkness. The more she moves forward, the more he feels stuck. The more she heals, the more he realizes he is still broken. And the more she chooses peace, the more he spirals into chaos. 20th, the empath no longer carries the narcissist's emotional burden, and that leaves him drowning in his own pain. Empaths often unknowingly take on the emotional weight of those around them. They absorb stress, worry, and pain, sometimes without realizing it. And for years, the empath may have unknowingly carried the narcissist's emotional instability, hoping that love would bring balance. But when the empath awakens, she drops that weight like a stone. She stops soothing his fragile ego. She stops making excuses for his behavior. She stops taking responsibility for things that were never her fault. And without that emotional anchor, the narcissist is left staring into his own inner turmoil. For the first time in a long time, he must face his own darkness without anyone to cushion the fall. 21st, the empath no longer feeds the narcissist's ego, and that leaves him starving for validation. Narcissists rely on external validation to feel whole. They need admiration, fear, or even resistance to confirm their dominance. And for years, the empath gave him something real, whether she realized it or not. She gave him challenge. She gave him space to act out. She gave him a reason to feel powerful. But when she stops feeding that hunger, when she stops reacting, when she stops admiring, when she stops giving energy, She starves the narcissist's ego, and for someone who built his life around control, that emptiness is unbearable. 22nd, the empath begins to live authentically, and that proves she was never under his control. One of the narcissist's greatest fears is being proven wrong, and perhaps the most crushing truth he must face is this: the empath was never truly under his influence. Yes, she stayed. Yes, she endured. Yes, she tried to fix things. But none of that was submission. None of that was weakness. It was resilience. It was hope. It was strength masked as patience. Now, as she begins to live freely without the narcissist rules, without his expectations, without his presence, she shows the world what he feared all along: that she was never his, that she was always herself, that she simply chose to give him a chance to be human. And now, she's chosen to leave him behind. 23rd, the empath begins to reclaim her time, energy, and power, and that leaves the narcissist exposed. When the empath starts rebuilding her life, she also starts reclaiming everything the narcissist took from her: her time, her energy, her trust, and her sense of self-worth. She stops giving second chances. She stops wasting effort on people who don't appreciate her. She stops questioning her instincts. She stops apologizing for existing. And as she regains her personal power, she unintentionally exposes the narcissist for who he truly is. Because the more she grows, the more obvious it becomes that his control was never real. She was never under his influence. She was simply allowing him space to fail. And now, she's chosen to walk away with everything he tried to steal. 24th, the empath begins to teach others how to heal, and that ends the narcissist's ability to repeat his cycle. Empaths don't just heal for themselves, they heal to help others. And as she begins to guide people through the same pain, she prevents future victims from falling into the same trap. She teaches others how to spot the signs, how to set boundaries, how to walk away. And with every lesson, with every warning, with every boundary taught, she weakens the narcissist's ability to manipulate again. Because now people know. Now they listen. Now they walk away before they even get close. And that is the final destruction of the narcissist's power. 25th, the empath begins to write her own story, and that steals the narcissist's spotlight forever. For years, the empath allowed the narcissist to define her. She believed his accusations. She questioned her decisions. She carried his words like scars. But now, she is writing her own narrative, one that no longer includes him, one that no longer blames her for his behavior, one that celebrates her strength, her growth, and her resilience. And that story, shared openly, steals the narcissist's spotlight. It paints him not as the hero of the tale, but as the villain, as the one who drained, lied, and discarded. And for someone who built his life on admiration, being exposed as a fraud is the ultimate humiliation. So if you've recognized any of these truths in your own experience, know this: you are not broken. You are not weak. You are simply human, recovering from something far more complex than most people understand. Empaths don't turn cruel out of malice. They become unyielding out of necessity. They stop giving energy to those who abuse it. They stop forgiving those who never truly apologize. And they stop loving those who only know how to destroy. And in doing so, they break the cycle. Because the empath who once gave everything to the narcissist now gives nothing. And that is the cruelest fate a narcissist can endure. Thank you for watching this video. If you found this message meaningful or helpful, please consider taking just a few seconds to like, subscribe, and share this content with others who may be going through something similar. Awareness is the first step toward healing. Understanding the dynamics between empaths and narcissists helps us see the full picture, not just the pain but the transformation that follows. Remember, you are not alone. You are not weak. You are not damaged. You are simply human, recovering from something far more complex than most people understand. Keep moving forward. Trust your instincts. And never forget that your strength is real, and it belongs to you now, fully and completely.